Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, counting down our top stories of the year that was. This week, it's number 10 through 6.
I feel like the Roundhouse just, it feels like a different place without sort of that kind of big, dominant personality.
Plus, local organizations come together to help alleviate food insecurity in some very creative ways. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. This is a time of reflection and evaluation for many of us as we get ready to embark on a brand new year. And we here at New Mexico in Focus always enjoy looking back at the stories that define the previous 365 days. We'll begin our countdown to those top 10 stories of 2021 with a special line opinion panel of working journalists from across the state. They work hard each and every day to bring you important news and information, and we appreciate them spending some time with us this week and next. Here with us virtually, of course, we start with Julianne Grimm, editor and publisher of the Santa Fe Reporter. We also welcome back Dan McKay from the Albuquerque Journal's Capital Bureau. Also with us is Jessica Onsurez, news director at the Carlsbad Current-Argus. And we welcome to the virtual table for the first time, Algernon Damasa of the Las Cruces Sun News. Thank you, Algernon, for joining us. Coming in at number 10, guys, on our non-scientific list, New Mexico found itself at the center of the entertainment world in 2021, but for all the wrong reasons. An investigation is still going into a shooting on the set of the film Rust near Santa Fe involving actor and producer Alec Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin is now claiming he didn't even pull the trigger when the gun went off, killing cinematographer Helena Hutchins. And Julianne, this happened at the famed Bonanza Ranch near Santa Fe, a place of some pride around here. Has this taken some of the shine off this industry that has been, you know, such a beacon of economic development and other things for the last decade for us?
I mean, I think the appetite the American public has for violence in film and television is not diminished by this tragedy that happened in Santa Fe, to answer your question. But I do think that this story was really interesting for the local press because it's really a Hollywood story that happened in our neighborhood versus like a New Mexico story, that has a real sense of place here. It's like all the cast of characters, if you will, the decision makers, many of the attorneys who subsequently get involved are really centered in Los Angeles. And so you're seeing the LA Times do a lot of really good journalism around this topic, along with lots of other national media. Lots
and lots and lots, absolutely. Dan McKay, interesting, a lot to talk about corners allegedly being cut on the set and, the role that may have played in the tragedy. We talked about this before, but does this stick to New Mexico film workers themselves? Do we get a bad reputation once the dust has settled on all of this?
Well, that's difficult to say. I do think that there is definitely increased debate throughout the country about the safety of film workers in general, but also the conditions on film sets. The legislature had a recent hearing on film incentives and the tax program, and the shooting did not come up, which I thought was really interesting, that it was a topic that either by coincidence or by agreement didn't surface in this major hearing over the expenditure of taxpayer money.
Interesting. Jessica, when you really think about it, interesting the timing. This all came about out on the heels of a historic vote by IATSE unions to authorize a strike in part over work conditions. That strike appears to have been averted, as we all know, but does this raise red flags about how much the film industry has its own house in order?
Definitely. I think a lot of the big questions prior to talk of a strike was not only the safety of the workers, but really working conditions all around. And as you mentioned, they did end up not striking, and they ended up signing up an agreement that addresses some of these kinds of things like raises and pensions and healthcare, but also maybe speaking to what happened on the Rust film set, things like getting enough rest time in between shifts for the workers who are on these film sets. So it's great to see that they're focusing more on safety of these workers who are always behind the scenes. It's not the people that you see in front of the camera, but the people behind the camera. So it's good to see that they're focusing on safety there.
Yeah. Algernon, I'm curious, Las Cruces has its share of film activity. Has this been an issue in the Las Cruces area in southern New Mexico?
I think that you have a similar conversation in Las Cruces that you do across the industry as far as safety and pay. I mean, there's a lot of talk about how to develop the infrastructure needed to attract more production work and generate more employment. But it's not just about landing a job and earning money. It's also about the quality of life while you're working, as well as safety and the feeling you have when you go home at the end of the day. Safety does take time. And in the film industry, time really is money. The cliche holds true. And so the concessions that are needed to assure firearm safety and other weapons and other fireworks, explosives, and things that we do on sets is just crucially part of that conversation, and it's going to cost the industry money.
You know, Julianne, there was a lot of speculation. I mentioned this before about the gun being used for target practice on the set for bottles and cans and that kind of thing. You know, it's a period gun, of course, and I gotta wonder how this affects people who were professionals in the business in Santa Fe. Again, we're kind of asking the same question just in a different way, but I'm just really curious. Something has to be talked about in Santa Fe, it seems to me, about maybe self-policing a little bit better on film sets to avoid these things?
Well, I mean, the gun that was used was a Colt 45 revolver. I think that a lot of people in the West are really familiar with that weapon. It's a weapon that's depicted on television and in film a lot. It's a weapon that requires the hammer to be drawn back before the bullet can be discharged. And the bullet is only discharged when someone touches the trigger. And contrary to, you know, the narrative that Alec Baldwin gave on national television, you know, something else happened. I think the investigation is slow to the eyes of, again, people are kind of used to CSI solving things on television in 60 minutes.
Good
but,
point.
you know, this incident happened on October 21st in Santa Fe. The Santa Fe County Sheriff is in charge of the investigation. They have sent ballistics to the FBI. We're not sure if those are back or not, but they would appear to not be. We haven't heard anything about them. The district attorney here in Santa Fe was really pressured, I think, by that ABC special into giving a statement in which she really said nothing about the charges. You know, charges haven't been filed yet. Charges still could be filed. You know, she didn't say this, Mary Carmack Altwise is her name, but, you know, Alec Baldwin has gone on television, not only saying he didn't pull the trigger, but also saying that he's pretty confident he's not going to be charged. And I'm not sure that that confidence is well placed. And I can't help but think that if this incident happened between, say, two local filmmakers who were shooting in their backyard, if one of them wouldn't be sitting in jail right now.
That's an interesting point. I had not thought of that angle. That's interesting. Hey, Dan, let's finish with this. You sort of touched on this earlier. I appreciate it. I want to bring it back about what could be done by the state to protect film workers here in New Mexico. Is there any kind of a movement you're hearing that asking for legislation?
I haven't heard anything about legislation at this point. I do think that there are administrative actions that can be taken by the occupational workplace safety agencies within the state. So I do think that's a possibility. As I said, I am interested to see how the shooting, you know, what role it plays in sort of this broader political debate about supporting the film industry in New Mexico and its contributions to the economy.
Good points there. Hey, moving now to our 9th biggest story of 2021. Cheryl Williams Stapleton was a roundhouse fixture for more than 2 decades, but that all came to an abrupt end after an early morning raid and subsequent indictment on charges she embezzled money at her job at Albuquerque Public Schools. Ms. Williams Stapleton has continued to claim her innocence, but she did resign her seat in the State House of Representatives just days after that raid. And Dan, I'm going to start with you. What sticks out to you from New Mexico's latest political scandal?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is that, you know, Cheryl Williams Stapleton may not have had quite as high a profile as, say, a governor or a House Speaker, but she was the number 2 person in the House. She has kind of a really dominant personality. I mean, she's just, she's one of those people who, when she speaks in a debate, it's just very forceful and kind of everybody pays attention. and she was not shy about confronting people within her own party, much less people in the other party. So I feel like the Roundhouse just, it feels like a different place without sort of that kind of big dominant personality.
Mm-hmm. Algernon, we've done a lot in recent years to try and cut down on these types of scandals, including creating the state's first independent ethics commission. But what are we still missing here that allowed this to apparently happen?
Well, I'm not really sure. And that's the thing, is that an ethics commission responds to things and establishes the line of play and interprets. But, those are reactive features. And, I don't know that an ethics commission can be looked to as a way to prevent things from happening. This is really about how do you respond when something does happen, whether it's accidental or premeditated.
Mm-hmm. Good points there. Jessica, Albuquerque Public Schools is not exactly around the corner from you, but I want to tell you they recently approved new procurement processes after the scandal. Apparently, they didn't have an official procurement policy in place before, especially around sole source contracts, which around these parts is a real difficulty, sole source. APS did alert authorities to these allegations, but should they have done more to protect against it in the first place?
Well, so definitely, I think that one of the things that every school district that I've ever worked with focus is on policies and procedures in place and making sure that there are ways to catch this. And to APS's credit, they did have an employee who saw something funny, spoke up, and actually did the right thing, which led to all of this. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're talking, should they do more? Definitely. Those are public dollars that we're talking about. The thing to take away from this, I think, is that we should be paying more attention, not just our own the employees within school districts, but those of us in the public who see these contracts go into place and these contracts awarded. We should be paying attention.
Interesting, Algernon, the scandal pushes us all away from does the scandal push us at all away from a citizen legislature? The reason I ask that, has the time come to make these paid jobs, or do you see momentum increasing towards that idea?
I don't know that something like this necessarily turns the public against the idea of a citizen legislature, because there's so much suspicion about a professional political class, we might say, and their susceptibility to corruption. I think wherever there's opportunity, access, power, you're going to run into pockets where corruption can take place. And I think that maybe the idea isn't that we should be moving towards a corruption-free world, although we can certainly minimize it, but really have a world where we respond clearly and effectively to corruption, whether the legislators are citizens or not. I do think, however, that doesn't excuse us from having the conversation we need to have about a legislative body where people are part-time and unpaid except for per diems, and how that may press people to directions that might include corruption, or at least the appearance of that. And so I don't know that it really pushes us in one direction or another, but it shows one more reason that we have to have that conversation and consider the merits of a well-paid, well-monitored legislative body.
I'd like to allow you all to take a cut at this question, because it's an interesting one. I get this feedback all the time about the citizen legislature. And Julianne, same question. Does this move us one way or the other about part-time, paid, unpaid people, or is there something more to come out of this?
I mean, I don't really feel like that's the big takeaway from this particular incident. This person was employed by APS in a pretty good job and had a good salary, also had a business that was apparently operating and relatively successful, a restaurant in Albuquerque. So I'm not sure you can make the argument that poverty drove someone to corruption. I like the way that Algernon framed it about an opportunity. And I think, as someone who's running a small business, watching every expenditure, every penny that we spend on records requests, it is really hard to conceive of someone being able to make this sort of getaway with $1 million of public money. Right. We just got a press release this week about someone from Sandia Labs who got prosecuted for spending $136,000 on a lab credit card for personal purchases. And it's really hard for me to comprehend how that scale of fraud and corruption can occur in these organizations. I'm pretty baffled by it.
Interesting points. I'm glad you got that in. Dan, same question again. Are you hearing any scuttle, even among the legislatures, that perhaps this situation moved them one way or the other about part-time versus full-time?
People have been pretty careful about what they say about this publicly. I do think that there's been a movement in the legislature for several years now looking for ways to provide them with a salary. Right now, they do get reimbursement for costs and per diem, but they don't draw a specific salary. And there's been a lot of debate over providing a salary so that a broader selection of people could run. So it could be that the Cheryl Williams Stapleton indictment surfaces in that debate and is used as a tool to push some of these ideas that they've already been kicking around. But at this point, people, it's been a topic people shy away from speaking about publicly.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Jessica, same, do you have a sense where you're sitting that perhaps this is pushing citizens or even legislatures down your way, one way or the other?
I think I would echo what Julianne said on all those fronts, maybe dive a little bit deeper and say that it's not pushing one way or the other. There are conversations I think need to happen that talk about really the entrenchment of power in Santa Fe, right? This was pretty shocking because we're talking about a legislator who is well-known, loved, had pretty extensive power within the ranks there. And how could someone not notice what was happening is the big question.
That's an interesting point there. Algernon, interesting when you think about it. We've had 2 special sessions to deal with redistricting, cannabis, and a few other things. Is it about money? I mean, we seem to have plenty of money, so it really can't be that.
Well, it's not entirely about money, but I mean, just because there's revenue coming into state coffers does not necessarily feel to the citizen that they have opportunities to thrive and succeed. And I mean, if we're talking about cannabis, I think that cannabis is sort of it opens this wide open space for where people imagine that they will have an opportunity for enterprise, as long as they also bear in mind that it's the costs up front of entering that marketplace tend to be higher than people expect when they're just getting in.
Yeah, good point there. And down your way, hemp as well. It's an expensive proposition to get into. That's all the time we have on those topics. Still ahead this week, our 6th and 7th top stories of the year. Plus, necessity breeds innovation when it comes to efforts to make sure everyone has enough to eat here in New Mexico.
I think, probably all of us in food security work, we have to try really hard to destigmatize the issue. We have to make sure that everything that we do is as, culturally appropriate as possible, as warm and welcoming as possible, as stigma aside as possible.
Welcome back to The Line now as we continue counting down the top stories of the year. Coming in at number 8 on our non-scientific list is the local impacts of Texas's historic abortion ban. The U.S. Supreme Court recently upheld that law, which effectively restricts abortions after about 6 weeks from conception. The justices did say that legal challenges to that law can continue. And Algernon, there is no way New Mexico won't feel the impacts of that law as women flock to the land of enchantment for service, but how sustainable is that long term?
Well, it's not as though we have a whole lot of centers in New Mexico to accommodate that need. And so, although New Mexico did take the step preemptively of repealing a statutory abortion ban in our state, if people are coming to New Mexico from Texas for services, you might see wait times, and you might see a problem, an obstacle to other women's healthcare services as well.
Jessica, down your part of the world, of course, where you are, I mean, Planned Parenthood says there are 55,000 abortions in Texas annually, and New Mexicans can't possibly absorb that kind of, number. I mean, are you seeing things already? What's your reporting telling you?
Well, let me just start by saying that the resources in New Mexico are not very huge for this type of service for women, right? If we're talking about southern New Mexico, they don't exist here at all. Really, you're looking at services offered in urban areas like Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. So the impact would further be seen in northern New Mexico than this part of the state. But we are closer to Texas, so we hear a lot of the conversations and a lot of the concerns. And to answer your question, I don't think with the resources that we have on hand that we will be able to, as you said, absorb that need. But I do think that it's maybe an opportunity to start that conversation about how we can improve those services or begin to offer more expansive ones.
Julianne, I got a tough question, and others may want to get in on this too. Is the reversal of Roe v. Wade almost inevitable at this point, as some people have suggested, not me, considering the current makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court? And what would the impacts be on New Mexico?
I mean, I'm not a Supreme Court scholar. You know, I would say as a woman in New Mexico, an American woman, a woman of the planet Earth, that that we need to maintain reproductive freedom and healthcare access for women everywhere. I have to say that, you know, what Algernon brought up, the New Mexico statutory ban that was on the books, was a really important change for, you know, advocates who are concerned that the federal law might make New Mexico's law actually a factor. And so, you know, they worked for a long time to get that repealed, and there were some changes in the makeup of the legislative bodies, particularly the Senate, that, you know, made that possible during this past legislative session. I mean, I think that it is, you know, uncontestably true that New Mexico's healthcare system is beleaguered on all fronts. That includes healthcare for women, that includes abortion services, and that includes birth control access, especially in rural areas, like Jessica pointed out. But even in Santa Fe, even before this happened, there were women who had to travel from Santa Fe to Albuquerque to get these services. And so you can imagine that with all the women that are coming from Texas, and this is not an if scenario. This is a when, this is a happening right now scenario. In order for women to get those services, they have to cross the state lines, and our state line is the line that they're crossing.
Dan, same question, Roe v. Wade, and maybe some things I'm interested you might be hearing about this. Some folks, you know, who are very against Roe v. Wade, of course, are seeing this as an opportunity. What's your reporting telling you what's happening in Santa Fe and Albuquerque?
Well, New Mexico does not have very strict abortion restrictions. Services are limited by other factors, you know, kind of the broader healthcare system here kind of being overwhelmed. But it certainly looks important that criminal statute was repealed, given the potential changes at the federal level. You know, that certainly could have a real practical impact. It wasn't just a theoretical debate. As Julianne mentioned, it has already changed the legislature. You know, an initial push to repeal that criminal abortion statute failed, and a bunch of legislators they lost their reelection bids. So it's already changed the legislature itself. You know, House Republicans in particular have still pushed for more stringent abortion restrictions. And, you know, they are just heavily outnumbered, and it's difficult to see any of that advancing unless there's some sort of cataclysmic event in local politics that changes the numbers of the legislature.
Algernon, of course, in southern New Mexico, it's a little more conservative in general terms on these things, but in Las Cruces, where you are, may not be directly applicable. You, of course, you're a college town. But I'm curious what you're sensing from folks in your part of the state on the idea of abortions. Just period. If somebody wanted to open an abortion clinic in Las Cruces, could they have success with it, or would it be open up a real hornet's nest?
Well, I mean, there would certainly be some public comment, but there would also be a lot of support for a facility that would provide services at a time when there's just not enough. There aren't enough providers, and again, it's not just aborting pregnancies. It's also birth control and other healthcare services, and as well as counseling and referrals to financial assistance. These are some of the reasons that women seek abortions, is because of their financial circumstances or other circumstances. So. I mean, there would certainly be opposition. There would probably be people waving signs. There would certainly be a lot of dialogue and comment about that. But at least in the Las Cruces area, the Doña Ana County area, where we are bordering Texas, I think that's certainly a possibility. The limits would probably be more infrastructural, financial, and also just the lack of providers in general, physicians, nurses, and other medical professionals in the state, especially as long as the COVID-19 emergency persists.
Yeah, it's a difficulty for providers to get into that, into the medical world. I appreciate you pointing that out. Jessica, we'll finish with you. Could an abortion clinic be open in Carlsbad and not be an amazing controversy to help absorb some of these things?
Well, let me share just a story that we reported on earlier in this controversy. There was a local doctor a woman's doctor who was providing just advice about how to seek abortions. And she was effectively marched to the border of the county with a thank you, but no thank you.
Wow.
So we are in a very conservative part of the state. And I think that you will see that play a major factor in whether those type of services are offered here. Now, I will add to that by saying I think that this has been an issue that has given a lot of people room to speak up. So those who normally would stay quiet about their support for expanding those types of services here are speaking up. We saw a lot of women's marches in southern New Mexico accompanying this following Texas's abortion bill. And we saw that in Carlsbad as much as we did in other rural communities surrounding us. So I think that while we might not embrace it, that there are definitely those voices out there who are getting louder about being able to voice their opinion on this.
New Mexico's own Deb Haaland comes in at number 7 on our list after becoming the first ever Native American cabinet secretary. President Joe Biden appointed her as Secretary of the Department of the Interior. And Jessica, staying with you, she has really wasted no time in showing the impact a Native voice can have on federal policy.
That is correct. So we saw her do some pretty, strong moves in her first months in office. Chaco Canyon, the protections laid on top of that historic site. It's a 20-year moratorium on oil and gas exploration. A lot of controversy surrounding that. But I think that when it comes to the secretary, a lot of people are excited to see what else she will do, just as a woman of Native American heritage and a woman in the cabinet.
Julianne, place names got a lot of attention, and it's very interesting, the power of a name. I'm curious your thoughts on the Secretary's attack, her approach, and what she wants to go after with this position.
I mean, I think one of the things that people are the most proud of Deb about is her advocacy on behalf of voices that perhaps have not been amplified to the degree, and there's no perhaps about it. It's that she is an advocate for voices that have not been amplified to the degree that they deserve. And she promised to be fierce for all New Mexicans, and in fact, for all Americans. And I think that her saying like this is not about politically correct language, this is about, moral identification, this is a serious matter. It's not okay to use these slurs that refer to, the female anatomy and other things. And I'm really proud of Deb. And I think a lot of New Mexicans are proud and just agree. Can't wait to see what else she's going to do. In addition to running the Boston Marathon in a ribbon skirt.
I forgot about that. That's right. She was terrific on that. Hey, Dan, boarding schools is obviously an issue going across North America, meaning the U.S. and Canada, but right here in Albuquerque and around New Mexico as well. It's almost like she's the perfect cabinet secretary at the perfect time. The timing could not be better to push these issues forward.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to have such a prominent New Mexican playing a role in all of these sort of national and international debates. She really has emerged as an important political voice in New Mexico and voice for communities that a lot of people probably don't think about, especially in other parts of the country. I know that her election just to Congress, not to mention her appointment as a cabinet secretary, I have talked to people who, they're just in tears seeing someone who looks like them, speaks indigenous languages, has ascended to that level. And, she's really become an important voice on all kinds of issues just beyond the Interior Department.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Algernon, what kind of bump do we get here in New Mexico with this appointment? Could she have perhaps done more, as Dan mentioned, as a member of the U.S. House, or are we better off here as a state with this position?
I think it is a unique opportunity that we have someone from New Mexico, where we are such a diverse state and we have so many, native peoples here. To have someone in this position, the Interior is a cabinet position that arguably has a lot of power and influence relative to other cabinet positions. Mm-hmm. You have somebody who not only has the background she has as a Native American, but also this working class background. This is a mom who has struggled with student loan payments and trying to make ends meet. And then she is elevated to this position of power. So I think the representation of her economic background as well as her ethnic background really matters. And also, frankly, the work that she's doing around names and language generally and telling our history matters. It's not just symbolic. I interviewed at one point a Native American leader from New Mexico's Arenas Valley, and he said something really interesting. We were talking about, we have landmarks named after Confederate heroes. We have, Baylor Canyon and other names that are kind of repugnant for people who are steeped in this history. And he said that he thinks that Americans generally may have forgotten the power of language and what is brought into being by the way we name things and the way we construct our stories. And I think that this is just a really unique contribution that a New Mexican citizen can make. And so that doesn't necessarily put anything in our pocketbook, but I think morally and historically, I think it really puts us in a prominent place to help improve the country. Mm-hmm.
Well said, Algernon. I love that. Jessica, is there, in your part of the world, oil and gas is obviously going to be a potential point of conflict with the Secretary of the Interior. What's happening down there? Is she persona non grata at this point? Are people just sort of waiting to see? What's your sense of it?
I think you put it perfectly. People are waiting to see. Now, we understand that with her appointment to this administration, an administration that has been very upfront about their move toward renewables and away from fossil fuels, that there is an expectation that she will be bringing that message strongly across the U.S. and specifically to the Permian Basin, our oil and gas producing region here in New Mexico. But there is still a lot of wait and see, because there are questions about how do you honor the what's best for the nation in terms of economy and growth, while also pushing while also asking the nation to accept this move toward this green energy, new climate change, environmental protections. Sure. All around. So we are just kind of biding our time and hoping that there will be an equitable path forward for both the industry and for the nation.
Julianne, New Mexicans faced a rare special election to replace Ms. Holland in the U.S. House. Democrat Melanie Stansbury, of course, won that race handily over Republican state lawmaker Mark Morris. Does that election solidify Democrats' hold over that seat in next year's crucial midterm elections?
I mean, will redistricting play a role in that? To ask a question, back to you. I know that we're going to talk about redistricting a little bit later, but, really, I think that we're going to be in it looks like anyway, if all this gets signed by the governor, we'll be in a situation where we have congressional districts that are different from any that we've seen in New Mexico in recent history. I do think that, similarly to the exercise that Algernon just participated in of are we better with Deb Haaland as Secretary of Interior versus a member of Congress? I think you can have that same conversation of are we better with Melanie Stansbury at Congress versus being at the Roundhouse? And I think we lost a strong advocate for water and somebody who could have been really a rising leader for state Dems, going to Washington. So I think that's a consideration also worth a few minutes.
Dan, I got to get you in on this one. Political shifting ground is pretty common, of course, but CD1 has been a traditionally very safe, Democrat seat, even with Republicans being elected, in that district, they were sort of, not so hardcore. How do you see the future of this district? I couldn't imagine it flipping red at any point, but in our politics right now, you never know.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is, the first congressional district has been an Albuquerque-based district, and if the redistricting proposal holds, it will now include, a lot of rural counties, not just the East Mountains, but stretch all the way down toward the southeast, although not quite into the oil patch. And so that will give Stansbury or whoever is running for the seat kind of a broader constituency, maybe. It may not be quite so Albuquerque focused. There may be some more debate about agricultural issues and things like that. It is a little too early to say about the political environment. We'll have to see if these maps get signed into law and who emerges to challenge her. But I think she certainly will have some different constituencies to answer to.
That's all the time we have for now. When we come back to the line, it's our 6th biggest story of 2021. Food insecurity is a year-long problem here in New Mexico, but we're all even more aware of the need during this season of giving. According to recent data from Feeding America, 1 in 7 New Mexicans are going hungry. And for kids, it's even worse at 1 in 5. That's why several organizations are using creativity and innovation to fill in those gaps. I recently had the chance to sit down with representatives from the Rio Grande Food Project, Food is Free Albuquerque, and the Albuquerque Free Fridge to learn more and how you can get involved.
Ari, as Executive Director for the Rio Grande Food Project, can we talk about terms here for a quick second just to get us going? What exactly is food insecurity? When you hear about it, a lot of folks hear this term, but I'm not quite sure if we all understand fully the ramifications of it.
Sure. So food insecurity is often kind of interchanged in just chatting about the issue with hunger, and they really are different. So food insecurity is defined as limited or uncertain access to food. It's most prevalent among families of color and those living in food deserts or poverty. Food deserts actually make up a large portion of New Mexico and Albuquerque. It's kind of little known, and what it means is that it's an area where the residents live either a mile or more from the nearest grocery store. That's true in an urban area, or in a rural area, a food desert is living more than 10 miles away from a grocery store. So that's the access issue. So food insecurity really is about just not having regular, dependable access to affordable and nutritious food.
According to data, I'm going to turn this to Aaron, Executive Director for Food is Free Albuquerque. 1 in 7 people in New Mexico are going hungry, and even worse, 1 in 5 children. It just hurts your soul to hear that. How does this effort fill that gap?
So we're a gleaning organization. We go out and we harvest backyard fruit trees, private orchards, and we also work with local farmers to harvest their excess. And then we take that and we get that distributed out to other organizations into their distribution networks. We believe that fresh food is a human right and everybody should have access to it. And we found a little niche in the food system growing right here in our backyards that we've been able to use and utilize to share with our communities.
What are we talking about I'm not quite sure how your business classifies these things. Is it tonnage? How do you measure how much food you're actually putting out there?
So we weigh all of our harvests and we sort it by human edible, animal compost. And that's how we determine it. So this year we did just over 27,000 pounds of human edible food that we shared with the community.
Wow, that's amazing. And somehow this food has to get to people. So let me reintroduce Ashley Remmelsberg, who's also one of our wonderful employees right here at New Mexico at PBS. We love having Ashley with us. And Juan Suarez, who both created Albuquerque Free Fridge. And Ashley, take this one first. Obviously, what I'm saying here is there's steps to getting food in people's fridges. Where does your organization step into this process?
Yeah, so we're a mutual aid organization that started earlier this year, and our goal is to help food insecurity in Albuquerque. So, we're at 606 Broadway, which is in the South Broadway neighborhood. And we have a free fridge that's open 24/7. It's outside of Juan's business here, and it's available so anyone can drop off food into the fridge and anyone can take food from the fridge. So we're just trying to do a small part in this community to help people with food insecurity.
Juan, I'm curious how much food goes in and how much food goes out. This is a fascinating deal.
Well, for us, it's a little trickier to keep track of it as we're really not trying to police the fridge itself, but we're doing weekly grocery runs with volunteers, and a lot of it is community based. Anyone can prepare meals in their kitchen, properly labeled and dated, and it goes in the fridge. So we know that we have a hard time keeping the fridge stocked. We put food in and the food is gone within hours most of the time, all within the community.
How long has the fridge been operating? Ashley, if you mentioned it, I might have missed it. My fault.
Yeah, the fridge opened in August. So
In
early
August,
we opened. Yeah. And yeah, we usually spend about $500 a week on food. So we collect donations from the community, monetary donations. And then people also bring food, people make sandwiches for the fridge, people drop off food for the fridge all the time. So
that's so fascinating. Might this be the first one, Ashley, of some more to come around the city?
That's the goal. Yeah. As you mentioned, we both have full-time jobs. So this is our passion project. So the goal is to create a network of free fridges, and we're currently working on building the volunteer base to be able to do that.
Ari Herring, let me bounce back to you for another sort of a broad question here. I mentioned those stats a little bit ago, and you mentioned, of course, this primarily affects people of color and others. I'm curious about single women, and particularly single women who are moms, and where they fit into the food insecurity picture.
Oh, that's a really important question. So the Rio Grande Food Project, we're a food pantry on the west side of Albuquerque, and we're also an urban garden and a community hub. So in the 80s, we were started as a food pantry, and we quickly evolved to, we realized that we're a focal point in the community, and so we have to have additional services beyond food to really address the root causes of why people don't have enough money to, make ends meet. We see a variety of people, certainly including single moms. Each week we carry out outdoor drive-through distributions, and then we also have an indoor food pantry. And during that, visit by households, we do our very best to chat with people and understand what the situation is, what they're facing beyond food issues, how we might address those. So on site, we're able to help people enroll in really important programs like supplemental nutrition assistance. So SNAP, it's previously known as food stamps, and TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families. Single moms are a good portion of the clients that we serve, and also grandparents raising grandkids. So this is far more common than I ever would have known prior to doing this work. It's at least in New Mexico, it's a really common household dynamic that actually the mother or father may not be in the picture, and that the grandparents are raising the kids, and they might be living, on Social Security only, and then have the responsibility for 2 or 3 children as well. So that's a really tough situation. Single moms who are working 1 or 2 jobs is something that we see really often. Same with single dads. That certainly is a scenario that we bump into as well. So the families kind of come in all shapes and sizes. The pandemic really exacerbated, any issue that was sort of a disparity prior to COVID-19, or some sort of real, serious impoverishment in our community prior to the pandemic just came to the forefront and became so much more obvious at a place like the Food Project. And it's something that I think we need to be really cognizant of in shaping programming moving forward. I think, probably all of us in food security work have to try really hard to destigmatize the issue. We have to make sure that everything that we do is as culturally appropriate as possible, as warm and welcoming as possible, as stigma aside as possible. We try to keep that threshold really, really low because people are facing so many challenges. The last thing we want to do is make it an even more difficult situation to access that food.
This is such a reminder, guys, talking to all of you, how the simple power of a meal functions in our world as a human being. It doesn't matter where you're coming from in life. If you cannot get a decent meal in your stomach daily, I don't care what it is, you're just not going to be able to kind of keep going on all cylinders. And I can't thank you guys enough for doing this. This is really very heartwarming.
Welcome back to The Line. We reached number 6 on our countdown of the top stories of 2021. New Mexico's looming housing crisis. Whether it be the shortage of affordable housing, soaring rental rates, or the rash of evictions, despite so-called moratoriums related to the COVID pandemic, New Mexico is reaching a breaking point. And Jessica, we spent time with you before the pandemic looking at the situation in the Permian Basin, you might recall. With all those transient oil and gas workers, we talked to one person that actually moved to Roswell and commutes to Carlsbad because of the high housing prices there. Has anything changed since we were with you back then?
No, but so we're no stranger to a housing crisis here, and you're right, it's linked to our oil and gas industry. And we have been working on solutions since, maybe imperfectly. We've done things like actively recruiting developers to the area. Maybe they focus a little bit more on building hotels and temporary housing. But we have also started to talk about how do we do recruiting for development of single family dwellings and things like townhouses, non-traditional types of housing that you wouldn't see in southeastern New Mexico.
Interesting. Julianne, I got to bump this up to you. Of course, all communities have some affordable housing, but why isn't it a bigger priority? Julianne, I know this is something Santa Fe has struggled with a lot, and there has been announcements of some groundbreaking on some properties to deal with this. But why is it such a struggle in Santa Fe traditionally?
It's about money, from my perspective. I mean, the housing crisis is felt acutely here, and there's a big gap between, the haves and the have-nots classically. I pulled a couple statistics for you in anticipation of this question, and I think that, these speak for themselves. And in the third quarter housing report that's put out by the Santa Fe Association of Realtors, the median single-family home price in Santa Fe is $591,000.
Wow.
And, if you live in a condo or a townhouse, your median is still coming in at $352,000. I just talked to some friends from high school who live in Reading, Pennsylvania, where they own a house on a city street that costs them $58,000.
Right.
So you can really, think about not only how the price of housing in Santa Fe compares to other parts of New Mexico, but really, other parts of the whole country. And I think, you see the government here in fits and starts trying to deal with this with various kinds of regulation. We have an affordable housing ordinance in the city that requires developers to dedicate a certain portion of homes that they build to be sold to a certain income qualified bracket of homeowners at a certain price. But that has not been enough to really change the picture. We're also seeing a lot of multifamily complex construction happening for really the first time in the last few years. There was a big period of time when there were no new apartment complexes in Santa Fe, and average rents here are more than $1,000 a month. So you've also seen activity on the very opposite end of the spectrum, where you're talking about trying to solve the homelessness issue and trying to provide housing for people who have no housing. And you've seen the city and the county both purchase hotels and, renovate them into housing. But, those kinds of solutions really take a long time to attack what is becoming an increasing big problem.
Wow, over almost 600,000. That's scary. Who could afford that? It's amazing. Hey, Dan, we've talked a lot this year about the eviction problem. Searchlight New Mexico has done some great reporting on how evictions are still happening despite those COVID-related moratoriums. What are we missing here on this front? Why? It seems pretty simple and elegant, but it's very bumpy.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's kind of a complicated network of laws dealing with housing and evictions and things like that. And then there are also the ways that just people behave. Many landlords don't want to accept Section 8 tenants just for their own philosophy. They don't want those kinds of tenants, or they're afraid that their other tenants will be mad that they rented to someone who gets a little help. So it's difficult to kind of legislate a solution to this. You also end up with kind of a not in my backyard dynamic, where efforts to build more housing or build high density housing often run into opposition from neighborhoods. That is something that politicians respond to. It really is a difficult challenge for New Mexico.
Algernon Online, regular Serge Martinez, we love having him on, does a lot of work in this area and talks about how quick the eviction process is. And I'm curious if, in your view, can't speak for Las Cruces and how the eviction deal works down there, but perhaps we can find some way to slow this down a little bit, because folks are being bumped out in the street fairly regularly at this point.
Well, yes. And so this points to the need for adequate legal services and even just general procedural knowledge. I was just speaking to somebody who is in the midst of a dispute, not an involving eviction, but involving property and title to his property. And basically, it was just at this level of, I can't afford an attorney and I cannot make heads or tails of what I need to do procedurally to advocate for my interests and my legal rights. And in a circumstance where you have so many people who already are contending with a public health emergency, with loss of employment related to that, perhaps they were sick for a long time and are still sick. In addition to that, you have this legal hurdle of how to hold on to your housing, which, if you lose it, immediately exacerbates all of your other problems. That's right. Health, physical, economic. And so really, I think that the problem just compounds all of the other issues that New Mexico is facing, which we had pre-pandemic and have been magnified in the midst of the pandemic.
Good point there. Jessica, the state did, as you know, got a lot of federal money to offer housing and rental assistance, but as tradition here, we had problems getting those funds distributed. How do we streamline programs like these?
Well, so I think maybe the big thing to take away from that question is that we all view housing as a basic human right, right? There is this absolute need for it, for shelter. And we want to do everything we can to make sure that if you are entitled to some of those funds to help you ensure that you have housing, you get access to it. As far as streamlining goes, I think this was an unprecedented thing for us. We don't have a lot, in my opinion, we don't have a lot of experience in getting it done smartly and quickly and well. So it's all a learning process for us. I think maybe the bigger question is, how do we make sure that those who are in desperate need are actually understanding what their rights are and can advocate for themselves and are able to speak up and say, hey, I know that you have this this program and you know that you have these funds. I am speaking up because I want access to them. So beginning to advocate for themselves rather than waiting for it to trickle down from the top.
Hey, Julianne, we also hear a lot of calls now for a return to rent control measures. It's amazing, for those of a certain vintage, rent control back in the 70s was kind of a big deal. Then it was gone. Is that something we should be looking at again? And does it have a chance in Santa Fe?
I think there's been a contingent in the community that thinks that might be a solution to consider. I think it's interesting the way that Dan framed kind of the decisions that landlords are making around which tenants to accept or not. And there's really this situation where they can be choosy, and they can make decisions that, I think to Jessica's point too, are discriminatory, and that people have a right to assert, challenges to that. People can't tell you they won't rent to you because you have children. That's against the law. It's against federal law. And I think that's, there are a lot of circumstances like that are really, this is a private sector situation where people who own property have control, and are, really the people who are renting are at their mercy. Yeah. And I think too that it's incumbent upon people who have stable housing and who do understand the law, to also say, to advocate for those people. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with renting to someone who gets a Section 8 housing voucher. That system is in place in order to give people a better quality of life, and we've recognized as society that that's what we want. Mm-hmm. So, we have to continue all the way to actually let them use those vouchers to find homes. And I think that if more people were vocal about that, and fewer people were worried about the not in my backyard perspective, maybe we could get somewhere on this.
Mm-hmm. Good points there. That's all the time we have for this week, but we'll be back next week with our top 5 stories of 2021. 2021 has had its fair share of challenges, as the first part of our countdown illustrates. But if there is one thing the COVID-19 pandemic has done, is lay bare some of these issues and inequities New Mexico has struggled with for generations. How we choose to deal with them as a state will say a lot about our commitment to solving these serious societal concerns. And there's no better time to start than 2022. We're committing to having these important conversations and encourage you to join us on that journey. You can start right now by engaging with us on our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.